And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I am delighted to be here at this year's Ontario Economic Summit. And in many ways, this is a logical setting for our Jobs and Prosperity Council to as well hold its summit and to get input from all of you, because the goals of both are quite similar, which is to inform the policies that further the prosperities of people in this province. The Jobs and Prosperity Council was announced in the budget of 2012 last March with a view to advise the government on sustainable growth for the province of Ontario. The Council is working towards that goal, but our agenda is much broader than that. We will be making recommendations on how Ontario can succeed in the global economy by using our advantages and seizing opportunities. Today, our province is clearly at a crossroads. We have some difficult choices to make, and to some degree, this is very much a call to action for all constituents across the province. I can't emphasize that enough. We've got to make sure that this is on the agenda of people in the province. Leadership is about making choices, and I don't just mean politically, although government has an important role to play in moving the province forward. What we need to do, government, labor, academe, and the private sector, is to create a shared vision for the future. And we need to act on that vision to make Ontario more competitive and create sustainable jobs and prosperity in the province. Now, the world has changed. I think people in this room recognize it, but we all have to recognize it. Emerging economies are driving a new era of intense global competition. The internet and the information revolution have made the world smaller, entrenching globalization, as well as accelerating that pace of change. Developed economies, still recovering from what was the worst financial and economic crisis and the global recession since the 1930s, are reinventing themselves and figuring out how they compete in this new global marketplace. Increasing global competition means that if Ontario settles for the status quo, it will quickly fall behind. Every region in the world is focused on how to position themselves to benefit from changing markets and economic shifts. And if we don't get our strategy right, then we will pay a very heavy price. While developed economies are experiencing a slow recovery, emerging markets are growing much more quickly. And while there may be hiccups along the way, that trend will continue. And that presents both opportunities, but it also presents threats. Ontario has important advantages that it can build on, but to compete and win in tomorrow's economy, we need to address the difficult challenges that we face together. We need to rethink and align our roles to build a competitive, global-orientated economy that supports sustainable jobs, sustainable private sector jobs. So the Jobs and Prosperity Council is going to report back to government, but our report really is a report to all Ontarians. We have attempted to engage many constituents across the province. We have and will be meeting with all political parties. This is not a partisan report, but it raises issues that all of Ontario has to address and issues that must be at the forefront of political discussion. We need industrial policies that pushes our provinces in a direction that builds future prosperity, and if the public doesn't understand it, and if political parties fail to address it, then the future generations will not have the opportunities that my generation has enjoyed. Now, I'd start by speaking about how Ontario is well positioned to take advantage of global opportunities, and then about some of the challenges that we face. I would also highlight the 5 key areas that we believe need to be focused on to help Ontario realize its full potential. And finally, where we'd like to see the province to be when we celebrate our 150th anniversary 5 years from now. So let me begin with some of our strengths. I honestly believe that Ontario's greatest advantage is its people. It sounds trite to say that, but it is very true. We have one of the best educated and one of the most diverse workforces in the world. Ontario has human capital as a competitive advantage. Ontario's post-secondary attainment rate is higher than any other in the OECD country. In 2010, 64% of our adults in Ontario have a post-secondary education credential. And our immigration policies continue to enable our population to grow, to attract those that will create wealth, those that will create prosperity. Particularly in today's world, where many developed countries are struggling with unemployment, as well as many socioeconomic issues. I know we have some, but on a relative basis, much fewer. Our ability to take advantage of our human capital strength has never been stronger. In addition, our competitive tax rate is also an advantage. The marginal effective tax rate on new business investment has been cut in half, from over 33% in 2009 to just over 16% by 2013. This compares to an average rate of over 20% in the OECD and a rate of nearly 35% in the United States. Although I will remind people that even with the results of last night's election, that rate in the United States is coming down. And a combination of federal and provincial tax measures means that Ontario firms have access to one of the most generous tax incentive programs for R&D among OECD countries, as well as a sound research system across our universities and public research organizations. We also have strong clusters. Toronto is the third largest financial center and the fourth largest health science community in North America. Toronto is also the third largest biotechnology cluster in North America. High-tech clusters in Waterloo, Ontario, and even Toronto, in my view, serve as innovation hubs. And of course, our auto sector and manufacturing sectors continues to be a very important part of our future. And certainly was pleased this morning to hear that the Windsor Bridge was unanimously approved by Michigan. Ontario firms benefit as well from a stable political and legal environment. And in a time of global financial instability and market instability, our banks continue to be amongst the most stable in the world. Finally, Northern Ontario is rich in natural resources. It has a huge untapped source of future prosperity. And certainly with industrial production surging in the developed economies, demand for these resources is only going to increase. And we have to find ways to ensure that we capitalize on these for the prosperity and job creation across the province. Now, as you've talked about, I know we also have many challenges. These strengths mean the table is partially set for Ontario to succeed, but while these strong economic fundamentals position Ontario for success, they certainly don't guarantee it. Significant challenges continue to remain, and government's ability to address those challenges is limited by significant deficit and modest growth prospects for economic growth. The Institute for Corporate Competitiveness and Prosperity has indicated that Ontario has a persistent and significant productivity gap, which was mentioned earlier. We continue to lag behind our North American and international peers, and our gap with the United States has widened over the past decades. There are many reasons for that, and defining and understanding productivity is a real challenge, but it is a real issue that we have to deal with. One cause for Ontario's poor productivity, is private sector underinvestment in machinery and equipment, technology, especially in information and communications technology. We must compete in higher-end, higher-valued sectors of the economy. Ontario's businesses simply do not perform enough research and development, and this chronic underinvestment has hurt our innovation performance. Underdeveloped risk capital markets also make it hard for entrepreneurs and young firms to get off the ground and expand. In a comparison of the top 20 North American jurisdictions for venture capital investment in 2010, Ontario ranked 18th on a per capita basis. Simply not good enough. Ontario's key North American competitors produce approximately 33% more patents in the U.S. patents than Ontario firms on a per-employee basis. We have a relatively weak culture of entrepreneurship in this province, which has led to a poor record when it comes to commercialization. There is no shortage of good ideas and good research here. It's getting those ideas to the markets where it is lacking. Too few small and medium-sized enterprises, which is the heart of our economy, export. Less than 7% are engaged in export activity. Those small and medium-sized enterprises that do export don't export enough. In fact, the average value of Ontario's small and medium-sized enterprise export ranks 47th relative to out of 50 states. There is a disconnect between the skills of Ontarians and the needs of Ontario firms. Ontario is currently facing a two-speed labour market, where employers in some sectors are struggling to find qualified employees, while unemployment remains high. And of course, youth are chronically unemployed and underemployed relative to the rest of the workforce in the province. And gaps in our physical and business infrastructure are holding the province back as well. The Toronto Board of Trade estimated that the annual cost of congestion in Toronto region cost the economy $6 billion in 2006. They projected that those costs could reach $15 billion in 2031 unless significant action is taken. Now, I'm not always a great fan of statistics, but we all know we have an infrastructure problem. And given the province's constrained fiscal situation, we can't just look to government to spend its way out of our infrastructure gap. We have to look and find other ways to do it. But a modern, efficient infrastructure is critical to all of us. And so it's up to all of us to find those answers. To address some of Ontario's challenges to help us reach our full potential, the Jobs and Prosperity Council has identified 5 key themes. These are areas where we believe Ontario needs to focus its efforts to become more competitive and create the kind of jobs and economy that will help Ontario compete and win. Firstly, seizing global opportunities. Ontario businesses must position themselves to succeed in the global marketplace by being early adopters and developing innovative products and services. Ontario's prosperity has always been rooted in trade. Our proximity and access to the world's largest market, the U.S., has historically been, at least in our generations, a key advantage. And our prosperity will always depend and be influenced by export trade. But as the global economy undergoes fundamental change, we must change with it. Unfortunately, our export markets haven't changed since Confederation. Together, the U.S. and the U.K. markets account for 86% of Ontario's exports. China accounts for 1.4%, while India accounts for only 0.3%. We can sit back and we can debate whether China is an opportunity or is a threat. But if we don't take advantage of it as an opportunity, we will lose. In many ways, Ontario's Achilles heel with respect to trade has been due to the fact that such a large percentage of global GDP has been represented by our neighbor to the south. That is shifting, and it's going to continue to shift. And as the U.S. declines and other regions overtake, we will be held back if we don't shift our trading patterns. How can Ontario grow and prosper when the markets with which it trades and does commerce are growing at such a slow rate? And I wish I could tell you that the developed world was going to grow at a fast rate over the next number of years, but I think we all know that that is very unlikely. Even Western Canada, which will likely continue to lead growth in this country, should be focused on as an opportunity for Ontario rather than a competitive threat. While consumers struggle to pay off debt in the developed world, a new middle class is emerging in developing nations, and firms across the globe are competing to anticipate and satisfy their needs. Ontario firms must win in these new and rapidly growing markets in order to create sustainable jobs for people in the province. We don't just want to sell commodities to these growing markets. We have to find ways to sell other products. Unleashing innovation and entrepreneurship, our second theme. To compete with the world, Ontario needs to unleash a new wave of innovators by creating the conditions that foster innovation and value big ideas. This includes increasing the quality and supply of venture capital to startups, as well as high-growth companies in the province. We need to do more to foster an entrepreneurial culture in Ontario, one that celebrates risk-taking. At the moment, our educational system and broader societal values tend to downplay the opportunities presented by entrepreneurship as a career path. Private sector leadership is important to build awareness and provide opportunities for youth to learn entrepreneurial skills and to expose young people to entrepreneurship programs and activities. And the public sector can play a role in accelerating the growth of innovative firms through strategic procurement, which will be part of our discussion. To digress for a moment, as mentioned, I chair Mars, and I'm staggered and amazed at the activity and the amount of innovative thinking and new companies that are burgeoning. But we have to find ways to spur that right across the province. Capitalizing on our strength and talent. Ontario's public and private sector must do more to capitalize on the diverse talent of Ontarians and turn existing potential into viable jobs and sustainable competitiveness. We must consistently align training and education with the needs of a dynamic labour market. We need better alignment between academia and the business to improve knowledge as well as labour mobilization. We need to shift more training from the classroom to the workplace to provide students with more experimental learning opportunities, address gaps in the labour market, especially when it comes to skilled tradespeople. And we need to ensure that talented immigrants and foreign students that come to Ontario stay in Ontario and build future and prosperity here. Driving productivity growth. Manufacturing has long been at the heart of Ontario's economic success. It was a critical driver of prosperity and rising standard of living for Ontarians through the 20th century. There is no doubt that Ontario's manufacturing sector has experienced a tough few years, but it has the capacity to grow and to reinvent itself. Manufacturing has a strategic, structural importance to the Ontario economy. Rather than view it as a dying sector, which many of the pundits do, from which we have to transform our economy, let's focus on how we reinvigorate it to ensure value-added manufacturing is a key component of this province's economy. Ontario is disadvantaged by lower productivity compared to its closer competitors, particularly the United States. Our private sector has the opportunity to close this productivity gap, especially in machinery and equipment, and we must find ways to encourage more investment. Finally, delivering smart, efficient government. A fair and transparent regulatory system protects the public interest and provides industry with clarity and a fair playing field. However, regulation can impose costs and time on business, particularly small business who don't have time or money. And that can limit investment and it can limit productivity. The key is finding the balance between protecting the public interest and limiting costs to businesses. While the Ontario government has taken significant steps to address the regulatory burden, much more must be done if we want our businesses to invest and to take risk. They need certainty. There's more to do to accelerate current reforms to build a strong regulatory system that encourages investment, that encourages job creation, and doesn't stifle decision-making. The Jobs and Prosperity Council has highlighted these 5 themes as being critical for Ontario's success in building the global economy. If we get this right, if we make the necessary decisions and take the kind of bold action we need to take, how can we or should we measure success? What would it look like? We would see Ontario firms winning in the global marketplace with higher value-added, innovative products and services. They would have accepted that the days of competing on costs are over. Ontario firms would successfully sell their goods and services globally. Our firms would continuously invest in technology to drive productivity growth. They would capitalize on the interconnectedness of markets by using world-class ICT to go global right here from home, to take advantage of opportunities in the global marketplace and to drive productivity gains. Ontario manufacturers would have achieved scale and would invest in best-in-class technology, machinery, and equipment. Ontario firms, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, would use the best market intelligence to enter and succeed in these new and growing marketplaces. The proportion of firms exporting and the value of these exports would increase continuously. We've got to measure these statistics. Ontario would develop, attract, and employ the best talent in the world, especially in areas like science, technology, engineering, and skills trades. We would continuously leverage and grow our strong regional clusters to drive innovation, build partnerships, and develop the economic potential of every region across the province. Ontario firms would lead the way in consumer-driven commercialization with industry, academic innovation, and collaboration at the heart of success. Now, while that may all sound too good to be true, we have to start somewhere. And we need to set objectives, and we need to measure ourselves against those objectives. This is going to be a journey. It's not a sprint. But if we ignore change, if we pretend this isn't happening now, we will be left at the back of the pack. Ontarians need to recognize the changing environment, and we need an industrial policy that will create sustainable growth. The new global economy has presented Ontario with challenges, but as I said, also brings opportunities. But we aren't in a position to capitalize on those opportunities and to achieve our full potential. The table is partially set for success, but we aren't there yet. The world has changed, and we have to change with it. We need to move in the right direction and at the right pace. We need bold decisions, we need action, and the time for tinkering at the margins is over. I believe we are going in the right direction, but we're not going fast or hard enough. We need to work together to ensure that the province seizes opportunities. The way we do business is changing, and business must lead that change. We simply cannot turn to government and hope for the best. It's up to all of us to show leadership in our respective fields. To chart the course for Ontario's success, Council members would like to engage with summit participants in setting the course. You've heard me speak about some of the themes that the Council believes present the biggest challenges as well as the biggest opportunities. We will be making a series of broad recommendations around these themes. We have formed 6 subcommittees from which you're going to hear from some of our members momentarily. They have focused on the following 6 areas: going global, entrepreneurship and innovation, manufacturing, regulatory reform, skills, training, education and immigration, and business supports. Now, I hope you're not disappointed today that you're not going to hear specific recommendations, as this is not the release of our report. It hasn't been finalized yet. But hopefully you will see directionally where our Council is heading. When we release our report, political parties may well disagree with some of the recommendations, but failure to work with business, labour, educators and others to take concrete actions to address these issues, in my view at least, will be an abdication of their responsibility to Ontario citizens. One of the things that we ask for is some form of review and accountability process within the next 12 months, regardless of the state of Ontario politics. We also hope that the issues and the recommendations of this report will be the focus of future leadership as well as election, platform, debate, and discussion. But now we want to hear from you. Whether we have hit the mark directionally, are these the areas where our collective action will have the greatest impact? If we get this right, if we take charge of our collective future and demonstrate the kind of leadership that Ontario needs. By the time we hit our 150th anniversary in 5 years' time, hopefully instead of talking about Ontario's potential, we will be talking about Ontario's advantage.